She thought he didn't care. He thought she was dead. Because someone made sure their messages never got through. And 10 years later, another alpha tried to claim what was never his. The first time Ryder Hale saw Ella bleed, they were 12 years old, and the world still felt like it would never end. Snow fell in slow, lazy spirals over the training grounds, softening the edges of the stone ring where the young wolves sparred. The mountains rose around them, dark sentinels wrapped in mist. Lanterns burned along the perimeter, casting long pools of gold over packed earth and boot prints. Ella stood in the circle with a wooden practice blade clutched in both hands, thin shoulders squared, chin lifted just enough to be stubborn. "We don't have to do this," Ryder said quietly. He was taller than her now, all elbows and new muscle and 2 big hands. His dark hair had fallen into his eyes again. She had to fight the urge to shove it back the way she did when they were younger. His voice carried just enough authority that some of the boys around the ring shifted uneasily. From the edge, Ryder's father, the alpha, watched, arms folded across his broad chest, eyes like cold steel. "You're the one who insisted she train with the others," he said. "If she's going to stay in this pack, she learns to stand." Ella heard the words like a brand pressed into her skin. Stay in this pack. The implication hung there, unspoken, but heavy. She tightened her grip on the practice blade. "I can do it." Ryder shot her a look that was too sharp for his 12 years. "You don't have to prove anything to him." "Yes," she said, keeping her voice low so the others wouldn't hear the tremor. "I do." He moved closer, the heat of him a shield she didn't ask for, but always felt. Snowflakes gathered on his lashes, caught in his hair. "Leo," he murmured, using the name only he dared shorten. "You're already bleeding." She looked down. A thin red line crossed her knuckles where the rough wood had split skin. It stung, but she'd had worse. From chores, from climbing rocks she wasn't supposed to, from running after him when he forgot to slow down for someone smaller. "It's nothing," she said. "It's not nothing to me." His jaw flexed. "You're shaking." From the edge, one of the older boys called out, mocking, "What kind of future alpha hides a girl behind his back?" Laughter rippled, nervous, eager to please. Ryder turned his head slowly, gaze cutting through the sound like a blade. The laughter died. He took the practice blade from her before she could stop him and stepped forward, putting himself where she'd just been, in the center of the ring, beneath the weight of every watching eye. "Then I'll take her rounds," he said. His father's voice was mild, dangerous. "That isn't how this works, Ryder." Ryder didn't flinch. "I know. This is how it works. They challenge, I answer. Anyone who has a problem with her can come through me." The air shifted. Ella felt it in her bones, the collective intake of breath, the way the pack straightened instinctively, responding to dominance not yet fully grown, but undeniable. Beside her, Ella's fingers curled empty in the cold. She felt exposed and useless and furious all at once. "Ryder," she whispered, "don't—" He didn't look back at her. "Get off the field, Leo." It wasn't a request. It was the voice he'd have one day when he gave orders that moved warriors and decided life or death. Something hot twisted low in her chest at that sound. She didn't move. The alpha exhaled, slow. "Your bond with that girl will get you killed if you let it rule you." Ryder's grip tightened around the practice blade until his knuckles went white. "Then it will be my choice." Ella's heart hammered, the world narrowing to the line of his back, the set of his shoulders, the way his stance widened slightly, as if he were already braced against a blow that hadn't landed yet. The first boy to step into the ring with him hesitated just a fraction too long. It was enough. Ryder disarmed him in 3 strikes, not flashy, not showy, just efficient. A fast pivot, a twist of the wrist, a sweeping blow to the knees. The boy hit the packed snow with a grunt. "Next," Ryder said. 2 more boys tried him, 2 more hit the ground. Ella's pulse stayed lodged in her throat, each thud of bodies landing like a strike against her ribs. This isn't helping, she thought. This will only make them hate me more. But when Ryder finally turned his head, just slightly, searching for her at the edge of the circle, the look in his eyes wasn't sorry. It was a vow. You're mine to protect. She felt it as clearly as if he'd spoken aloud. That night, the tragedy came quietly. No war horns, no shouted alarms, no time. Ella woke to smoke in her lungs and heat licking at the rafters above her narrow bed. The small cottage she shared with the old healer who'd taken her in groaned under the strain of flames. Hands grabbed her shoulders in the darkness, shaking. "Ella!" The healer's voice rasped. "Up, child, move!" They stumbled into the night, coughing, the sky above the village glowing an angry, impossible orange. Wolves ran, half-shifted in panic, some toward the fires with buckets, others toward the point where the scent hit hardest. Rogues. The word tore through the pack like a howl. Ella felt it in the marrow of her bones. She turned, searching instinctively, heart hammering one name silently. Ryder. Before she could move, a hand like iron clamped around her wrist and hauled her back, deeper into the shadows between 2 stone storehouses. Ryder. He was taller now, the last year having stretched him into something leaner, sharper. Ash dusted his dark hair, smeared across one cheek. His eyes were no longer boy-soft. They were burning. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "I know," she managed. His gaze dragged over her like a physical check, shoulders, arms, throat, bare feet in the snow. Only when he found no blood did his shoulders lower a fraction. "You can't be out in the open," he said roughly. "They're pushing toward the houses. They'll smell fear first." "What about your—" "Don't worry about me." His hand was still wrapped around her wrist. He didn't let go. A roar split the night, nearer. The Alpha's call. Commands followed, guttural and clipped. "Ryder!" his father shouted from somewhere in the smoke. "With me!" Ryder flinched. For a heartbeat, Ella saw the split in him, duty on one side, the iron weight of it. Her, small and breathing too fast, on the other. "Go," she said, forcing the word past fear. "You have to." His grip tightened. "I'm not leaving you alone." "Then we both die," she shot back, sharper than she felt. "I'm not worth that." His eyes went dark. "Don't ever say that again." She swallowed, throat painfully tight. "Ryder." "If they breach the inner wall," he said, each word low and fierce. "You run to the western tree line, follow the river. Don't stop, don't look back, don't wait for me. Do you understand?" Her stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? This is our home." "Do you understand?" he repeated. Terror pounded at her ribs. The healer's hand found Ella's back, pushing her gently forward. "Yes," Ella whispered. He moved before she could say another word, pulling her into him, arms fierce and unyielding. Her face pressed to his chest. His heartbeat thundered under her cheek. For a few stolen seconds, the world outside the narrow alley disappeared. His face dipped into her hair. "I'm coming back for you," he murmured, voice breaking on the last words. "I swear it, Leo. No matter what happens tonight, 10 years, 20, I don't care. I'll find you." A shudder ripped through her. "You better," she tried to say lightly, but it came out hoarse. "I'll make your life miserable if you don't." A breath that might have been a laugh left him. He pulled back just enough to look down at her. In the firelit shadows, his gaze was raw, unguarded. 12 years old, and already wearing the weight of a crown. He lifted a hand like he might touch her face, fingers trembling in the air between them. He didn't touch. He dropped his hand instead, jaw locking. "Run if you have to," he said, "but don't stop breathing. Don't stop fighting." Then he let her go. He turned, shifting mid-stride, bones lengthening, fur bursting through skin, his body warping into the massive wolf that already carried Alpha in its shoulders. He vanished into smoke and flame, chasing his father's call. Ella watched him disappear and felt something inside her crack, quiet and deep. She didn't know it then, but that was the last time she'd see him for 10 years. By dawn, the world she knew no longer existed. The pack held, barely. The rogues were driven off, bodies left dark against the snow beyond the outer wall. But the cost was written in ash and grief. The Alpha stood in the courtyard, face ashen, blood drying on his bare forearms. Warriors knelt around him, torn and exhausted. The healer's cottage was gone, reduced to smoldering ruins. Ella searched the faces, throat burning. No flash of familiar dark hair, no too serious eyes, no boy who'd promised he'd come back for her. When she asked after Ryder, no one met her gaze. The healer found her an hour later, once the dead had been counted. "Pack business," she said, voice rough. "He's alive." Ella's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Where is he? I need to—" "He's gone, child." The old woman's gaze softened with something like pity. "His father sent him north with an escort. There are allies there, safer lands while we rebuild." Ella stared. "He left? Without saying goodbye?" The healer touched her shoulder. Some goodbyes cut too deep to survive. Ella shrugged the hand off without thinking. "He promised," she whispered, more to herself than anyone. "He said he'd come back for me." The healer's silence felt like a verdict. Snow began to fall again, soft and relentless, covering blood and ashes and the last footprints leading out of the gate. Ella stood in the middle of a pack that had survived and never felt more alone. The first winter without Ryder was the hardest. The pack moved like a wounded animal, cautious, watchful, licking its wounds in private. Borders were tightened, patrols tripled. Every creek in the forest felt like a threat. Ella worked. It was the only way to keep from drowning. She patched wounds in the healer's hut until her hands cramped. She learned the names and scents of herbs, the sharp tang of poultices, the low whimpers of wolves who couldn't shift back yet. When the healer's back ached too much, Ella hauled water, chopped wood, scrubbed blood from stone. At night, when the world went quiet, she lay awake staring at the curved beams of the new roof above her bed and listened to the wind move through the pines. Sometimes she thought she heard a wolf's howl, distant and familiar. She'd sit up, heart hammering, fingers gripping the blanket. No one came. Years blurred. She grew. The girl who'd clutched a practice blade too tightly sharpened into something leaner, steadier. Her limbs lengthened, her features changed, the soft roundness of childhood giving way to fine angles and shadows. Her eyes stayed the same, wide, dark, full of stubborn light, but the innocence in them dulled at the edges. Access to the training grounds became less of a fight. After the attack, the Alpha had less energy for old prejudices. An Omega girl who could handle a blade and set a bone became less of a liability and more of a necessary edge. Ella trained when she could slip away, sparring with whoever would face her. Her body learned to move with efficiency, not brute strength, turning larger opponents' weight against them, slipping out from under holds, finding leverage in small spaces. She took every hit, every bruise, every bloody nose as a debt she would one day collect. From who, she wouldn't let herself name. The second winter, word reached them. Alpha Hale had fallen in battle against a rogue alliance that had been building in the north. The day the messenger arrived, the pack gathered in the main hall, breath frosting in the chilled air. The Alpha's seat at the head of the table sat empty. Ella stood at the back, next to the healer. When the words were spoken, Alpha dead, heir alive but unaccounted for, a sound rolled through the hall, low and wounded. Her ribs felt too tight. Unaccounted for, lodged like a bone in her throat. Later, in the quiet of the healer's hut, she whispered, "He's not dead." The healer didn't chide her for using his name like a talisman. "No," the old woman agreed softly. "A bond like that doesn't vanish. It goes quiet. It waits." Ella looked down at her hands, scarred now, knuckles roughened. Then why doesn't it hurt less? The healer's gaze was kind. Because you aren't the kind of soul who forgets. The third winter, rumors came instead of messengers. Whispers carried by merchants along the mountain passes. A new alpha in the north. Young, ruthless, strategic. A Hail by blood, some said. A bastard, said others. A ghost, said a few in hushed voices, remembering the boy who disappeared. They spoke of a wolf, whose pack didn't fall easily, whose patrols left rogues scattered and broken in the snow. A leader who built alliances carefully, not out of softness, but out of calculated survival. Ella listened from the shadows, drying her hands on rough cloth, pretending not to care. The rumors grew details like burrs on fur. He never took a mate. He never attended seasonal gatherings. He refused all offers of alliance through marriage. He's proud, one merchant said over ale. Too proud, thinks himself above our traditions. A pack without a Luna doesn't remain balanced. Ella's jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. She excused herself before she said something she couldn't take back. Proud, above tradition. Those were not the words that fit the boy who'd stepped into a training ring for her, who'd stood between her and his father's displeasure, who'd made promises with ash in his hair and fear in his eyes. But 10 years could change anyone. She learned to fold that thought away, bury it with the others. Far to the north, beneath a different stretch of sky, Ryder Hale stood on a ridge and watched his patrol return. They were little more than shapes against the snow at first, dark movement against endless white. As they came closer, he inhaled, scenting smoke, sweat, the iron tang of blood, but not too much. No fresh death clung to them. He exhaled slowly. One of the warriors shifted as he approached, fur sinking back into skin, bones rearranging with a crackle. He knelt, head bowed, snow steaming off his shoulders. "It's done," the warrior said. "No sign of survivors. The rogue den won't be troubling our borders again." "Any trail leading farther east?" Ryder asked. "No, Alpha. Whatever was gathering them there seems ended." Ryder nodded once. "Good." The word felt thin. The old satisfaction of a crisis resolved never seemed to land anymore. Victory had become another notch on a long, endless ledger of things that needed doing. He dismissed the patrol with a tilt of his head and lingered on the ridge as they moved past him toward the stronghold. The wind was sharp, needling exposed skin. His breath fogged in the air. The snowfields stretched out below, silver under the late afternoon light, broken only by the dark ribbon of forest and the faint line of the river cutting through it. He followed the river with his gaze, always, to where it vanished around a distant bend. Memory lived there. A girl standing in snow up to her ankles, chin lifted too high, gripping a wooden blade with bloody knuckles, ash in the air, firelight on her face as she told him she wasn't worth dying for and clearly believed it. Ella. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in years. Pack life didn't leave room for ghosts, but in the privacy of his own skull, it lived there still, a lit coal that refused to cool. He'd searched for her. For 3 years after his father shipped him north under cover of night, he'd pushed every border, tested every bit of information that came through allied packs. He'd sent messengers home as soon as he'd had the power to command them. Each time, the answer came back the same. No sign of the girl who'd lived with the healer. No record of her among the dead after the attack. No grave with her name. The healer was gone too, old age finally claiming her, one report had said, and for that, he'd been grateful. The woman had seen too much pain already. Some nights, when exhaustion stripped his control, his wolf paced under his skin, a restless weight. "We lost her," the animal part of him snarled. "We failed. We survived," the man answered. "Our pack needs us. It never felt like enough." 10 winters carved new lines into him. The boy who'd clutched a practice blade in a snowy ring was gone. In his place stood a man whose presence could quiet a room without a word. His features had sharpened, Jaw squared, shoulders broadened with a fighter's muscle. Scars mapped pale lines across tan skin, each one a story he didn't have time to tell. His voice had lost its boyish roughness. It had become something low even, carrying command without strain. He didn't waste words. He built his pack with the same deliberate ruthlessness. There were no excesses in his halls, no indulgent feasts while the outlying families scraped through winter. The stronghold itself, carved into the rock and reinforced with timber, was solid but not ostentatious. He bled for his wolves and expected them to bleed for one another. He refused every offered match. "Oh, come now, Alpha," a neighboring Luna had teased once at a rare gathering. "Don't tell me you're waiting for the goddess to drop a mate out of the sky. We all know that's just a story for pups." Ryder had smiled politely, the expression not touching his eyes. "I'm not waiting," he'd said. "I'm working. There's a difference." The truth was more complicated. He'd smelled plenty of women. Some were beautiful, some clever, some both. But none had made the world sharpen into painful focus. None had tangled with the faint old thread in his chest that had never snapped, only stretched. Sometimes he wondered if he'd imagined the connection he'd felt with Ella as a boy. If what the healer had called a bond was simply loyalty, gratitude, stubborn attachment. Then he'd wake from dreams so vivid his hands shook. Dreams where Ash clung to her dark hair, where he reached for her and found only empty air, and knew he hadn't imagined anything. He just might have to live his whole life with it unresolved. Until the messenger came from the mountains. The first sign of trouble was the smell of blood on unfamiliar winds. The second was the way the guard at the main gate called for Ryder without looking away from the approaching party. Ryder crossed the courtyard at an unhurried pace, each step controlled. Inside, his wolf pressed against his skin, teeth bared, sensing something just beyond understanding. "Report," Ryder said quietly as he reached the gate. The guard swallowed. "Scouting party from the South, Alpha. Wounded. They're not ours." Ryder inclined his head and stepped forward as the gate creaked open. The scent hit him first. Smoke, sweat, metal, and underneath, something else. Faint, elusive, like the ghost of a memory. Crushed pine needles and winter air in an older forest, the sharp, clean tang of riverstone. His pulse kicked hard enough to feel in his throat. 3 figures approached across the packed snow. 2 walked upright, cloaks pulled close against the cold. Between them, a third stumbled, leaning on the others heavily. The wounded one's scent was a mess of pain and blood. As they drew nearer, Ryder's gaze caught on the smallest of the 3. A woman. She moved with care, body angled protectively toward the wounded man, shoulders tense. Her hood shadowed her face, but the way she held herself, something about it scraped along old, buried recognition. The air thinned around him. The woman's steps faltered when she saw him waiting. He watched her hesitate, straighten, and lift her chin. The motion was small. It hit him like a blow. He knew that chin. He knew the stubborn set of it, the quiet refusal to bend even when she was shaking. Ella. The name exploded in his chest, ripping through 10 years of silence. His fingers curled against his thighs. "Alpha Hail," one of the men said as they came to a stop. "We come under your banner seeking aid. We were attacked on the ridge 2 nights past. Rogues, organized, not scattered. Our gamma fell. Our escort is—" His voice blurred, words losing shape. Ryder's entire focus narrowed to the woman. She reached up with hands that bore old scars across the knuckles and pushed her hood back. Dark hair spilled out, longer now, braided back from her face. Her features had sharpened with time, childish softness gone, leaving high cheekbones and a mouth that looked too serious. A thin, pale scar traced her jaw, disappearing into her hairline. Her eyes were the same, deep, dark, steady. They hit him like the first breath after nearly drowning. "Ella," he said. Her name came out lower than he'd meant, scraped raw at the edges, as if his voice had forgotten how to shape it and remembered all at once. A flicker moved through her gaze, shock, relief, fear, something harder he couldn't name. Ryder, she answered, and the sound of his name on her lips after 10 years nearly unraveled him. Silence stretched, the wounded man sagged, groaning. Ella tore her eyes away from Ryder long enough to catch his weight, hand braced against his ribs. The spell broke, Ryder's training slammed back into place. "Get him to the infirmary," he said, voice flattening, turning into command. He gestured sharply to his own healers. "Now, I want a full report on his injuries and every word he managed about the attack." His wolves moved at once, taking the wounded man with practiced efficiency. Ella let him go, fingers lingering just a second longer than necessary on the man's sleeve, a habit born of care, not intimacy. Ryder's wolf still didn't like it. Mine. The instinctive snarl caught him off guard with its ferocity. He locked his jaw, exhaling slowly through his nose, and forced his posture to stay loose. Ella turned back to him fully now. Without the weight of the wounded to anchor her, she looked suddenly smaller, alone in the open courtyard, under the watchful eyes of strangers. But she didn't fidget. She didn't drop her gaze. She stood there in her worn, travel-stained cloak like she had every right to stand before an alpha on his own ground. "Thank you," she said, "for letting us in. Do you truly think I'd turn you away?" The words came out harsher than he intended. Something flickered in her expression. 10 years is a long time, she replied quietly. Long enough for many things to change. "You haven't," he wanted to say, "and neither have I." Instead, he turned slightly, gesturing toward the inner doors. "You'll speak with me," he said, "not a question. We'll discuss what happened, and why a scout from my birth pack is bringing organized rogues to my doorstep." The man who'd spoken earlier shifted uncomfortably. "Alpha, we didn't mean to—" Ryder's gaze cut to him. The man's mouth snapped shut. "Rest," Ryder said coolly. "Eat. Your answers can wait until you can stand without swaying." His tone softened by a fraction. "You've reached safe ground." He didn't look at Ella when he said it, but he felt her react like a heat shift in the air. The hall he led her into was not like the one of their childhood. It was carved deep into the mountain, sturdy and spare. Thick beams ran overhead. Fires burned in stone hearths along the walls, pushing back the cold. Wolves moved with quiet efficiency, nodding to Ryder as he passed. They stared at Ella, not rudely, not exactly, but curiosity hummed in the space between each glance. "Who is she, to walk at our alpha's side?" their eyes asked. She walked like she didn't notice. Ryder noticed everything. The way she glanced once, quickly, at the nearest fire as they passed, checking for, what? Safety? An escape? The way her hand hovered near her hip now and then, as if used to a blade being there. The faint hesitation in her gait that suggested an old injury, long healed but not forgotten. He led her to a smaller chamber off the main hall. A war room, but not only that. Its long table was strewn with maps, but there were also books along the wall, shelves of supplies, a softer chair in one corner where he sometimes fell asleep when the nights ran too long. He closed the door behind them with a soft click. The silence that settled felt heavier than any crowd. Ella stood near the table, hands at her sides, gaze flicking briefly over the maps before returning to him. Up close, the changes in her hit harder. She had always been slight. Now she carried a quiet strength that had nothing to do with brute force. Her posture was balanced, weight evenly distributed. Her eyes assessed the room like someone who'd learned the cost of not knowing her exits. She had been a child he'd wanted to shield. Now she was a woman his wolf recognized on a level that had nothing to do with nostalgia. "Mine," the animal part of him repeated, calmer now, but no less certain. He ignored the pull, crossing the room with measured steps. "You should sit," he said. "You've been on the road." "I've been worse," she answered. But she sat, lowering herself onto the bench in a way that suggested, yes, maybe she had been worse. He remained standing because he didn't trust what would happen if he sat too close. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. 10 years of unsaid things crowded his throat. "You were gone. I looked. I failed. You left without a word. I waited. I bled for a promise that never came." He saw it all reflected in her eyes. "Start at the beginning," he said finally, keeping his voice neutral. "From the moment you left your pack's territory until the moment you reached my gate." She huffed a breath that might have been a humorless laugh. "That's not the beginning, Ryder." His gaze sharpened. "For the purposes of strategy, it is." He watched the way his name affected her, a small tightening around her mouth, a flicker of something vulnerable she masked quickly. "Very well," she said. 3 weeks ago, our scouts started finding tracks near the southern border. Single rogues, we thought. But the trail was too clean, too deliberate. They were testing us, poking, then vanishing before a counterattack could land. "Cowards," he muttered. "Planners," she corrected. "Whoever was guiding them knew our patrol patterns. They waited until we were stretched thin, moving supplies to the high pasture before the first snows. That's when they hit." She told the story with no embellishment. Rogues, coordinated, striking at an outlying homestead. A trap laid for the responding patrol. Wolves forced to split, then picked off. And woven through her words, like a thin, unbreakable thread, was the quiet fact of her presence in every critical moment. She'd been there when the first warning howl sounded. She'd been the one to drag a fallen warrior out of a collapsing barn. She'd set bones between lungfuls of smoke, held bleeding wolves down, while someone else seared wounds closed. "You're still with the healer," he observed when she paused to catch her breath. "She's gone," Ella said softly. 5 winters now. I took her place." "Of course you did," he thought, "because you'd rather break your own spine than let something else fall." His hands itched to reach for her. He didn't. "Why come here?" he asked instead. "There are closer packs, closer strongholds." A shadow moved across her expression. "Because the last tracks we found, the ones leading away from the ambush," her fingers curled against the tabletop, "they led north, toward your land, and my alpha—" She stopped abruptly. Ryder's eyes narrowed. "Your alpha what?" She lifted her gaze to his. For the first time since stepping into the room, anger flared openly. "My alpha suggested we manage our own mess before dragging old allies into it," she said. "He didn't want to appear weak before the northern packs." Heat flashed low in Ryder's gut. He sent you to clean up a rogue network large enough to take down trained patrols, and he was more concerned about his pride than your survival? "He didn't send me," she said. "I went anyway." "Of course you did." He exhaled slowly. "With 2 wolves and a half-scouting party." Her mouth twisted. "We had what we could spare." "And your alpha still sits in his hall, worried about appearances." "Presumably," she said, "unless the rogues have reached him by now as well." The thought landed heavy. He moved to the table, bracing his hands on either side of a map, needing the distraction of visuals. Lines, landmarks, borders, something he could solve. Ella watched him, eyes tracking the way his shoulders flexed under his shirt. "Why did you leave without sanction?" he asked, not looking at her. "You know what that means in pack law." She was quiet for a beat. "I know exactly what it means," she answered. "I also know what it looks like when my alpha underestimates a threat. I've seen too many bodies carried home on the same mistake." He lifted his head, meeting her gaze across the table. There it was again, that old, familiar steel. Not loud, not reckless, just unbending once she'd decided what was right. "You always hated being told to stay behind," he said. "You always hated following orders you didn't believe in," she shot back. Silence hovered. Then, Softer, she added, "Some things don't change." Some things, he thought, and felt his chest tighten. No, some things only deepen. He moved around the table slowly until he stood on her side, close enough now to see the faint spray of freckles across her nose he didn't remember, the tiny crescent-shaped scar near her temple that he did. She sat very still as he approached, but he saw the way her breath hitched, the way her shoulders stiffened like she was bracing for impact. "I sent for you," he said quietly. Her brow furrowed. "What?" "After my father died, after I took this territory, I sent messengers, letters, wolves who knew those roads." His voice remained steady, but it cost him. "None of them found you. None of them even found proof you still lived." Her fingers tightened on the edge of the bench. "I never got any message," she whispered. "Not a single one." He believed her, instinctively, absolutely. "Someone intercepted them," he said flatly. "More than one someone," she replied. "Over years." They stared at each other, realization settling between them like a new threat. "Who would benefit," she asked slowly, "from you believing I was dead, and from my alpha believing you'd forgotten we existed?" He already knew the answer his wolf wanted. Anyone who understood that an alpha with a true mate was harder to manipulate than one who believed himself alone. Mate. The word vibrated through him with a weight he'd avoided naming aloud all these years. Something shifted in the air between them. Ella's nostrils flared, a faint tremor running through her as if she'd caught the shape of his scent changing. Her voice dropped. "Ryder." He stepped closer, unable to stop himself now. "You smell the same," he murmured, his tone low, roughened by a decade of restraint. "Under the blood and the travel and the mountain wind, you smell like that winter by the river." Color rose in her cheeks. "You remember that?" "I remember every time you almost fell in and blamed the ice." "I did not—" "You did," he said, and a ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. "You refused to admit the rock was slick." Her eyes narrowed. "You refused to admit you were showing off." "I was," he said simply. "I was 12. You watched me like I hung the moon. Of course I showed off." Her mouth parted slightly, caught between indignation and something softer. He reached out before he could talk himself out of it. His hand hovered near her cheek, fingers inches away from her skin. 10 years of distance compressed into that small space. She didn't pull back. He saw the moment she realized what he was about to do. Her pupils dilated. Her breath stuttered. Still, she didn't move. Very lightly, he let his knuckles graze the line of her jaw. Heat shot through him at the contact. Not wild, not uncontrolled, just a deep, grounding current that felt like finally coming home to a body that fit. Ella's lashes fluttered. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then closed around his wrist, not to push him away, not exactly, but to anchor. "Ryder," she said again, his name a warning and a plea braided together. "We have more important things to discuss than this." He leaned in, just enough that his breath brushed her cheek. "We've had 10 years of more important things," he said softly. "You lived through them. So did I. We're still here. I can give us 5 minutes." Her eyes closed, a pained sound catching in her throat. 5 minutes, 10 years. It didn't feel like enough. He should have stepped back. Instead, Ryder eased onto the edge of the bench beside her, turning his body so they were nearly knee to knee. Ella didn't shift away. Her hand was still on his wrist, fingers warm, pulse quick against his skin. She stared at the far wall like it held all the answers she needed. "It wasn't pride that kept me from you," he said quietly. "It wasn't indifference. I need you to hear that before anything else." Her throat moved as she swallowed. "Then what was it?" "Chains," he said simply. "Some visible, some not." He told her then. About the night his father dragged him from the smoke, half shifted and shaking, and forced him onto a waiting horse. About the argument that had splintered the yard, Ryder refusing to leave, the alpha bellowing about heirs and duty and not throwing lineages into fires for lone girls. About how his father had used the word weakness like a weapon. He said if I stayed, I'd die, Ryder said, and you with me, that the rogues were targeting our bloodline, that making me disappear was the only way to keep our enemies from finishing the job. He lifted his gaze to hers. I believed him, not because I trusted his kindness, he didn't have much, but because I'd seen the way those rogues fought. They weren't wild, they were directed. And you didn't come back, she said, no accusation in her tone, just flat fact. He nodded. Every time I tried, something intervened. Another attack, another alliance that needed shoring up. A council that hinted they might reconsider their support if I insisted on chasing ghosts instead of fortifying our new home. His mouth twisted. They were very good at dressing self-interest up as strategy. And your father? She asked. He died thinking he'd saved me from myself, Ryder said. From you. The words hung there, stark and ugly. Ella flinched, just barely. I searched anyway, he continued. Sent messengers as soon as I had the power, took patrols too far south under the guise of scouting potential threats. Every time I pushed, I hit a wall. Something like guilt flashed across her features. What? He asked sharply. She exhaled. The first winter after you left, our alpha became stricter. He said we were not to reach beyond our borders without cause, that the North had made its choices and we had to make ours. Ryder's jaw tightened. He cut ties with my bloodline. He said you'd abandoned us, she replied quietly, that you'd decided we were a liability you couldn't afford, that if we wanted safety, we needed to prove we could stand without leaning on ghosts. He stared at her, struggling with the urge to get up and put a fist through the nearest wall. Instead, he forced his voice to stay low. And you believed him? Her fingers tightened around his wrist. I believed my eyes. You were gone. No message, no letter, no sign. Winter after winter. If not for... She stopped. If not for what? He pressed. Her gaze flickered down to where her hand held his. If not for this ache that never fully went away, she admitted. If not for the way every howling wind sounded like a voice I couldn't quite make out. If not for the healer's words, echoing long after she died, he shifted closer. What did she say? What did... Ella's eyes grew distant, seeing a memory. That some bonds don't break when we say they should, she murmured. They break when they're mishandled, and if they don't break, it means someone, somewhere, is still holding their end. Ryder's throat felt tight. I was, he said simply. Every day. Silence fell, heavy but not empty. She let go of his wrist slowly, fingers dragging along his skin before falling back to her lap. You should know, she said, voice steadier now, that our alpha made other choices too, ones I didn't agree with. Such as? He asked. Such as refusing aid to border families who'd lost everything because they hadn't been wise enough to move closer to the stronghold before winter. Such as refusing to send more guards with the healer when she went to tend wounded in the outer rings, because her skills are not limited by distance. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Is he cruel? He is afraid, she said. Afraid in the way of men who wrap fear in arrogance. He's seen packs crumble and decided he'll never be one of them, even if he has to harden himself into stone to avoid it. And you? He asked softly. Are you afraid? Of rogues who coordinate, she said. Of a threat big enough to send me north with blood on my heels? Yes, only a fool wouldn't be. That's not what I asked. She considered that. I'm afraid, she said eventually, that I will spend my life choosing the lesser evil, that I will watch wolves die and tell myself it was necessary because someone convinced me there was no other option. Her hands curled. I'm afraid of becoming the kind of leader who looks at someone like I used to be and sees a liability rather than a person. He watched her carefully. You see yourself as a leader. She blinked. No. I see myself as someone who steps in when the person who should has turned away. Sounds like a leader to me. Color touched her cheeks again, but this time it was irritation. You can't just call me that and make it true. I'm not making it true, he said. I'm acknowledging what already is. The words landed somewhere deep. He saw it in the way her shoulders dropped slightly, like she'd been holding herself braced against a blow and hadn't realized it. He shifted, closing the last of the space between them. The bench creaked softly under their combined weight. Their knees brushed, sending a small shock of awareness up his leg. Ella, he said quietly, do you think I waited 10 years without taking a mate because I'm too busy? Because I don't understand the value of alliance? Her breath caught. I don't know why you did anything. I wasn't there. I didn't, he said, because every time I tried to consider it, every time someone suggested a match, I smelled ash and snow and river rocks. I heard your voice in my head telling me I was being an idiot. I felt the echo of your hand on my sleeve. Her eyes glistened. That was a long time ago. It still matters, he said. It matters enough that my wolf will not accept anyone else. It matters enough that even before you walked through my gate, if someone had asked me if I was truly alone, I would have said no. He reached up again, slower this time, giving her every chance to move. She didn't. His fingers brushed a loose strand of hair back from her face, tucking it behind her ear. His thumb grazed the edge of the scar on her jaw. How did you get this? He asked. Barn collapse, she said. A few winters after you left. Beam came down. I was in the way. You've always been in the way, he murmured, between danger and everyone else. Her mouth curved, faintly. Someone had to take your place. He inhaled sharply. His thumb slid along her cheekbone, tracing the line of her face. Don't do that, he said quietly. Don't talk about my place like it's a role anyone can step into. You know better. She looked at him then, really looked, like she was cataloging each new line, each scar, matching them to the boy she'd known. I used to think, she said slowly, that if I ever saw you again, I'd hit you first. He huffed a soft laugh. You still can. I won't stop you. And then I'd ask you why you didn't come back, she continued. Why you let me stand in a courtyard full of strangers and hear you'd vanished. Why you let me believe. Her voice frayed. Believe what? He pressed gently. That I wasn't worth turning around for, she whispered. The words cut straight through him. He shifted, closing the last sliver of distance, and took her face carefully in both his hands. Her skin was warm, soft under the calluses of his fingers. He held her like something precious and breakable, and at the same time like something that could withstand storms. Her breath hitched. Look at me, he said. She did. I would burn every alliance I've made to get you back, he said, each word steady and deliberate. I would tear my way through every council chamber, every law, every mountain between us, if I thought it would bring you one step closer to safe. The only reason that didn't happen sooner was because I was convinced you were either dead or living a life where my presence would only bring you more danger. Her eyes shone now, unshed tears making them even darker. You thought I'd be safer without you. I thought you'd be safer without my enemies, he corrected. I was wrong. Distance didn't keep danger from you. It only kept me from standing between you and it. He dipped his forehead to hers, closing his eyes as their breaths mingled. The contact was small. It felt monumental. His wolf settled with a low, satisfied rumble that vibrated through his bones. Mine. Finally. Say something, he murmured. She exhaled, breath trembling against his lips. This is reckless, she whispered. We have no idea who's pulling the rogue's strings. We don't know why they're moving now. We don't know who's been intercepting messages or how far this interference goes. We have your pack, my pack, 2 territories worth of wolves who may be walking into a coordinated storm. True, he said. And you, she continued, are sitting here pressing your forehead to mine like that's not the most intimate thing anyone's done to me in... She caught herself, cheeks flushing deeper. His eyes opened, dark and intent. Is it? He asked softly. The most intimate thing? She swallowed. I haven't exactly had a line of suitors. Good, he said instantly. Her lips twitched. Ryder. I'm serious, he said. The idea of anyone else touching you like this makes my wolf want to start a war we don't have time for. She searched his face, something like fragile hope warring with caution. And what, she asked slowly, does your wolf want to do with me? He didn't answer with words at first. Instead, he lifted one hand from her cheek and slid it down, curling it around the back of her neck, fingers threading into the hair at her nape. The hold was firm, but not forcing. She shivered. He wants to guard you, Ryder said quietly. To stand at your back until neither of us can stand anymore. To rip apart anything that lays a hand on you without your consent. To curl around you in the dark and listen to your breathing until the world ends. Her breath stuttered again. And you? She asked. What do you want? He leaned in, slow enough that she could stop him at any point. She didn't. I want, he murmured, his lips a hair's breadth. Not by erasing what happened, we can't, but by making sure it never happens again. I want you here, in my halls, at my side, where no one can decide for us what we are or aren't allowed to be. Her voice was barely audible. And what are we, Ryder? Bonded, he said simply, whether we like it or not. He felt her breath hitch, her fingers fisted in the fabric of his shirt. Do you? He asked, whisper soft. Like it? The smallest sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. I have spent 10 years trying to smother something that refused to die, she said. So, no, I don't like it. I live with it. I fight with it. I wake up with it clawing at my ribs. Her eyes met his, fierce and unflinching. And right now, she finished, I want you to kiss me so badly, I can't remember why it's a terrible idea. He didn't make her ask twice. The first brush of his mouth against hers was not gentle. It wasn't brutal either. It was controlled in the way of a man who'd spent a decade learning discipline and found the one place he wanted to spend it all. Heat surged through him at the contact, a slow, steady burn rather than an explosion. Her lips were soft, parted on a small gasp that he swallowed, deepening the kiss only when she leaned in instead of pulling back. Her hands slid up his chest, gripping the front of his shirt like she needed something to hold on to. The low sound she made when he angled his head and took the kiss a fraction deeper nearly undid him. He kept it slow, deliberate. His thumb stroked along her jaw as his mouth moved against hers, tasting the salt of unshed tears, the sharp inhale when he tugged lightly at her lower lip. His other hand stayed at her nape, anchoring her, thumb massaging small circles into tense muscles. Ella responded with a kind of cautious hunger, like someone who'd gone too long without food and wasn't sure how much her body could handle. She kissed him back with a mix of hesitancy and stubbornness, as if she refused to be passive even now. He loved her for it. He'd loved her for it since the first time she'd stood between him and his father's temper, thin shoulders squared like her defiance would be enough to stop an alpha. He eased back when he felt her breathing turn ragged, breaking the kiss with reluctance, resting his forehead against hers again. They were both breathing hard. Her eyes stayed closed for a moment, lashes damp. When she opened them, they were clearer, more focused. We can't afford to be stupid, she said, voice hoarse. "We're not," he answered. "We're recalibrating." She snorted softly. "You make everything sound like strategy." "It is," he said. "Every choice we make from now on, we make together, with the understanding that our lives are no longer just ours." Her brows drew together. "Our lives?" "Our packs," he clarified. "Our wolves. Our bond. You said it yourself. Someone has been interfering. Someone has been keeping us apart because they understand what we are when we stand together." She exhaled slowly. "That sounds arrogant." "It sounds accurate," he countered. "You're a healer who doesn't bend for cowards. I'm an alpha who's spent 10 years learning exactly how far power can be pushed before it cracks. Put that together, and it's a threat to anyone who profits from our weakness." He eased his hand from her neck, though the loss of contact felt like peeling skin. "We'll deal with the rogues," he said. "We'll expose whoever has been cutting our lines. We'll decide what to do about your current alpha and his choices. But none of that changes this." His hand dropped to where her fingers still clutched his shirt. "This," he said quietly, "has been mine since the day you stepped into that training ring with a bleeding hand and refused to back down." Her lips trembled. "You were only 12. You didn't know what mine meant." "I knew enough," he said. "The words have only grown clearer." She pulled back slightly, just enough to search his face. "Ryder," she said softly, "if we do this, if we acknowledge what this is, we don't get to take it back. Not in any way that doesn't leave us both ruined." "There's nothing to take back," he replied. "We're only admitting what's already been true for 10 years. "And your pack?" she pressed. "They've followed a lone alpha this long. Some of them are probably invested in keeping you free for alliance purposes." "Then they'll be disappointed," he said. "Or relieved, or both. Either way, they'll adapt. They're strong enough." "And mine?" she asked. "They already resent me for speaking out of turn, for going where I'm not ordered. If I show up bonded to you, they'll think you orchestrated it, that you sent me some mate call I couldn't refuse." He almost smiled. "Did I?" She rolled her eyes despite herself. "You know what I mean." He sobered. "We'll go together, with proof of what's been done, with allies at our back. I won't drag you into your own hall on my word alone and expect them to bow." "And if they refuse?" she asked quietly. His gaze held hers, unwavering. "Then they can keep their pride," he said. "I'll keep you." The words were simple. The vow underneath them was not. Ella inhaled sharply. "You would risk—" "I would risk," he cut in, "everything I've built rather than let you go again. I survived 10 years without you because I thought I had no choice. Now I do." She studied him for a long, raw moment. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand and placed it flat against his chest, over his heartbeat. It thudded steady under her palm. "I'm angry," she said quietly. "At them, at time, at you, at myself." "I know," he said. "I'm afraid," she continued, "of what we'll uncover, of who we'll lose, of what this will ask of us." "So am I." Her fingers curled slightly, nails catching in his shirt. "But I am more tired," she whispered, voice fraying, "of standing alone, of pretending I don't feel your shadow every time I walk anywhere dangerous, of acting like my life is something separate from the promise you made in an alley full of smoke." His breath stuttered. "Then don't pretend," he said roughly. "Not with me." She looked up at him, eyes shining with something fierce and fragile and blazing. "Fine," she said. "Then hear this. I am yours, Ryder Hale. I have been since before I understood what that meant. I'm angry about it. I resent it. I wouldn't trade it for anything." Heat flared in his chest, spreading outward. "And you," she finished, voice dropping to a low, intimate register, "are mine. No council, no alpha, no law gets to decide otherwise. Not anymore." The growl that slipped from his throat was quiet but unmistakable. His wolf surged, pressing against his skin, not to take over, but to acknowledge, bonded. He leaned in, capturing her mouth again in a kiss that tasted like a sealed vow. This one was slower, less desperate, more certain. His hand slid into her hair, cradling her head, careful not to push for more than she offered. Her body leaned into his, soft curves meeting hard lines, fitting into the shape he hadn't known he'd been holding ready all these years. When they parted, they stayed close, foreheads touching, breaths mingling. Outside the chamber, the world remained dangerous. Rogues still prowled, alliances still shifted, enemies still worked in shadows, cutting lines, twisting truths. Inside, for the first time in 10 years, something finally aligned. "We'll start with your wounded," Ryder said softly, after a long moment. "I'll send my best scouts to backtrack the rogue's trail. We'll pull my records of every messenger I sent south and see where the pattern breaks. And then we'll decide how to confront your alpha." "We?" Ella echoed. He smiled, slow and dangerous. "I'm not sending you back there alone." She exhaled, a sound that was half relief, half resignation. "You realize this will be war." He shrugged one shoulder. "Then it's war, just one more thing we do together." Her lips curved despite everything. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," he said. "It will be messy and costly and full of choices that haunt us. But we won't face any of it from opposite ends of the world again." She nodded, the motion small, but decided. "Then show me your maps, Alpha," she said, a hint of challenge in her tone. "If I'm going to stand at your side, I want to know exactly what kind of trouble we're walking into." He released her slowly, though not completely, fingers lacing with hers as he guided her to the table. Their joined hands rested between the lines of ink and the carved edges of the world. 10 years stolen couldn't be given back. But every step they took from that moment forward, they took together. Years lost, reclaimed, not by pretending the past hadn't happened, but by refusing to let anyone else write the rest of their story. As they bent over the maps, shoulders nearly touching, breath mingling in the warm, firelit chamber, the mountain outside stood steady, holding their secrets. And for the first time in a decade, the bond between them didn't feel like a ghost. It felt like a future.